Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing the new film Nickel Boys. Briefly, Nickel Boys follows Elwood, a young man whose dreams are shattered when he is sentenced to Nickel Academy, a brutal reformatory school. The movie is based on a book by the same name. It was inspired by the notorious Florida reform school where boys were beaten and abused. It opened in the 1900s, and throughout its history, the school was known for its harsh conditions and brutal treatment. Despite numerous calls for investigations and reforms, nothing really changed. A study that ended in 2016 uncovered human remains in 55 graves, several with gunshot wounds or blunt force trauma. Those who survived the school often struggled to adjust, ending up in prison or suffering from alcohol and other substance abuse. I felt that the film was an honest adaptation of the novel. Considering the subject matter, I was impressed by how it never turned into trauma porn. The film utilizes key archival footage of this period to mark the passage of time, and it is entirely told from the first-person perspective of two young men, Elwood and Turner. At first, I felt that the decision to shoot in the first person it would be incredibly distracting. I wasn't 100% sold on it. However, as the movie goes on, it's really effective in terms of building the relationship between Elwood and Turner. It also works really well to highlight the differences between the two characters. I also felt the shift from one perspective to the other was seamless and it felt incredibly natural. I have read the book, so I am curious to see how people who haven't read the book interpret this film. This is an incredibly intellectual, cerebral movie, more so than maybe an emotional one. In the book, you feel incredibly devastated for Elwood because you understand that his life has been stolen from him and there's very little he can do to get it back. And the more hope Elwood has for leaving Nickel, the worse you feel because as a reader, you understand that this just simply is impossible. And because the movie fast forwards through Elwood's early life, you don't really appreciate the gravity of what has been stolen from Elwood when he is sentenced to this prison. That being said, this film is meticulously well made. It's very careful to build on each character. It doesn't waste anyone on screen to the point where you can clearly see what each character represents in a place like Nickel, whether it be a bully or a prey. I think having the story told from the first person was very unique in that you can appreciate how their perspective expands and grows and how this expansion not only enables them to survive, but find purpose in an environment that's constantly trying to break them down and tell them that they're completely worthless. And of course, this environment applies not only to Nickel, but the US in general. At the heart of the story is the friendship between Elwood and Turner. They represent two totally different perspectives on what it means to be Black in America. Surviving Nickel requires a lot more than just simply getting out alive. A lot of the traumas these young men suffered follow them long after they leave Nickel. And Elwood's story is particularly devastating because he's a very optimistic young man with big plans for his future. Unfortunately, bad luck sends him down a different path. In contrast, his friend Turner is more of a realist. For him, surviving Nickel is really no different than surviving the outside world. Nickel, like every other institution, has a hierarchy where the strong victimize the weak and those in charge victimize everyone. Now, Nickel is a racially divided school, and although white inmates do receive more benefits, it's not much. Every student is basically abused. Students are used as free labor for the community and sometimes even entertainment for older men seeking to satisfy their perversions. The people benefiting from this school are, of course, the administrators and the people who fund the school and support it. And you can see that in the ease in which young men are sentenced to Nickel and forced to stay here for long periods of time. One of the most memorable moments from the film and the book is when Elwood is taken for his first lashing. And while he's waiting for his turn, he's trying to calculate how many lashings he will receive. Unfortunately, he's just not really able to do it. Now, these thoughts are not expressed in the film. However, you do still feel the fear that he has waiting for this violence to begin. In the book, he notices that those who started the fight and those who tried to stop it received the same amount of lashings. In some cases, the victims even receiving more. He then starts to wonder if there's any logic to this violence, whether or not anyone really understands why they're doing what they're doing. From day one, students are introduced to this tier system, and they're promised that if they work hard enough, they can work their way up and graduate from this academy and live a better life. However, moving from one tier to another is incredibly arbitrary and pretty much depends on your luck. The whole system is designed to keep you trapped there. And even if you manage to beat the system and graduate, it really doesn't matter, because as far as the school is concerned, you have a 99% chance of coming back. Their ability to survive nickel pretty much destroys their ability to survive in the real world. There's something inherently evil about a system that benefits from the suffering of others, and this goes beyond race. And I thought the bond between Turner and Elwood really spoke to this. And the impact that each young man has on the other is what enables them to see a world outside of their own. Elwood comes from the MLK School of Justice and Resistance. However, being at Elwood forces him to reconsider everything that he knows. And his relationship to Turner forces him to reevaluate what it means to resist oppression. And I was very impressed with Elwood. He never succumbs to Turner's point of view. Instead, he uses it to fuel his fire and come up with more radical ways to combat the system. And of course, all these ideas that Elwood is brainstorming is really stressing Turner out, because he feels like this will lead to their demise. And being at Nickel, Elwood realizes that, and I think that's why what makes this movie very special is even how Nickel is portrayed. He comes to realize that even if he manages to graduate from Nickel, what's stopping them from putting him right back here? There's just no solution other than to destroy a place like this. However, how do you do that without getting yourself killed? And again, the first person perspective does allow us to appreciate how Elwood's ideas of freedom and resistance start to expand. And because he starts to notice a grave discrepancy between what's written on paper legally and what the state seems to be imposing on them. The relationship between Elwood and Turner mirrors that of Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier in The Defiant Ones, a film that Nickel Boys makes reference to multiple times. John, referred to as Joker, is played by Curtis, and Noah Cullen, played by Poitier, are wanted convicts who manage to escape after a car crash. Chained together, their only hope for survival is to learn to cooperate. Their bond becomes so strong that Cullen, with a clear opportunity to escape, decides to come back for Joker. His sacrifice solidifies their friendship and changes Joker for the better. Unfortunately, Joker's enlightenment came at the expense of Cullen's freedom. Now, in Nickel Boys, survival does not require one young man to sacrifice his life for the other. Instead, it relies on the impact one young man can have on another young man's life. Turner's time with Elwood also forces him to reevaluate his own life. He starts to see the world through a different lens, one far less limited than before. So much of Turner's life has revolved around his physical survival, not so much his emotional or mental one. After meeting Elwood, he starts to become open to learning about things he assumed had no purpose in his life. And as a result, he gives himself a fighting chance and finds the will to live, and also the will to live a life worth living. Now, overall, I highly recommend this movie. I think it's just so well made. Now, if you have time, I would read the book beforehand. However, it's not necessary. So please look out for this film on Amazon Prime Video. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.